This video is sponsored by Green Chef. Use my code KaylaSays60 to get 60% off plus free shipping on your first box. Go to greenchef.com for more details. Also go follow me on Twitter. My old one got suspended, so this is my new account. Thanks. I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned this before, but season 7 of RuPaul's Drag Race is the first season of Drag Race that I ever watched all the way through. Now, this is back when all of the episodes were free to stream on Logo, and at the time, season 7 had just finished airing. Some friends had recommended that I check it out, and so I went ahead and clicked play. Of course, I fell in love with the show, and because there weren't a million franchises and spin-offs yet, my only option was to go backwards in time, and that's what I did. So it was really interesting getting to understand why this season in particular was getting such a bad rap in comparison to stuff like 4, 5, and 6, and all things considered how well 7 has aged, with many of the show's biggest stars coming from this particular era. So we're going to do a full retrospective on all of that today. But before we get into it, this episode is sponsored by Green Chef. Green Chef is a CCOF certified organic company that gives you the tools to prepare delicious meals every week. Green Chef has options for every lifestyle: keto and paleo, vegan, vegetarian, fast and fit, Mediterranean, and gluten-free. Green Chef supports a healthy lifestyle with pre-portioned, easy-to-follow recipes delivered right to your door. It's never been easier to hit your wellness goals. It also saves you time by taking care of meal planning, grocery shopping, and most of the prep you do week after week, so you don't have to. So I really enjoy cooking, but because I work full-time and I do this with the rest of my time, I don't always have the time to delve into the world of recipe crafting as much as I would like to. But the great thing about Green Chef is that all of the ingredients for these banger recipes come pre-measured. You know, you don't have to waste a lot of time prepping. You can just kind of get all the ingredients, go, do your thing. All the instructions are really clear. And it's always meals that make you feel good at the end of the day. It's meals that taste great, they're healthy, they're balanced, and it's much more preferable than the, 7 p.m. last minute fast food dump that doesn't make you feel so great. And on top of all of those wonderful things, Green Chef also has a green thumb. Green Chef offsets 100% of the plastic in every box, so you're reducing your food waste by up to 23% versus grocery shopping. Something about me that you should know is that I'm a super picky eater, and chicken and rice is one of my staples of life, so any way that I can up my chicken and rice game is something that I'm down for. So we are going to try some of this out. Oh wow! Yeah, it's good. Very good. Use my code KaylaSays60, that's KaylaSays60 to get 60% off plus free shipping on your first box. Go to greenchef.com for more details. So I know it's been a while, but at the time season 7 aired, it got mostly a bad rap by fans, and at first glance, it's pretty easy to understand why. I've probably said this before, but seasons 4, 5, and 6 are generally considered the golden era of the show, and for good reason. Each of them had a solid narrative for each of the top 3 contenders, the challenges still felt fresh and interesting, and no dramatic twists had been introduced yet, and everyone forgets this one, but the drama was still there, and in my opinion, it's this aspect of those core 3 that truly makes them stand out. Season 6 in particular is my favorite season of the show, and is generally regarded as probably the best one to date, and so season 7 definitely had some big shoes to fill when it aired. Now, the main issue with season 7 has never been the cast. The cast rarely is the issue with seasons that are regarded as less than good, unless we're talking about All-Stars, which whole different thing, obviously. Tinfoil Hat Time, here's what happened in my opinion. The producers probably took notice of how beloved their past 2 winners had been. Jinx Monsoon and Bianca Del Rio are 2 powerhouse performers who are funny and eccentric and more of, a drag queen's drag queen. Ginger Minj, who had made it to the top 3 in season 7, definitely fits that same mold. And before anyone gives me shit, I'm of the opinion that not only was she supposed to win the whole thing, but she should have won the whole thing. Flame me in the comments, fuckers, I live for it. This should have been a home run, but the execution was fumbled, and I'm going to tell you why. It's clear that this season had more of a theme in its casting choices than seasons have had in the past. With the exception of a few outliers, you were either an older, more classic drag queen who's been doing it for a while, or a younger, skinny, white, fashion-forward drag queen. And this is even brought up during the season with both the jokes about the Aryan Airlines team in the second challenge, and of course the bitter old lady brigade. Here is my theory about what was supposed to happen here. Weed out some of the older, more seasoned queens early on, then put the look queens in a bunch of performance-based challenges, therefore illuminating how much stronger of a performer Ginger is in comparison, giving her a Bianca-esque run to the crown and making the look queens appear to be more, inept or villainous or whatever. Several things backfired with this plan though. Number 1, watching fashion queens flop around like dead fish during scripted group acting challenges can only be so entertaining for so long. 2, eventually you do have to incorporate staple look challenges that come at the end of the season, like the ball and the makeover, and Ginger can't sew. And 3, not only did the fandom grow to appreciate the more fashion-forward queens as the season progressed, in a way that honestly monumentally changed the show, but in constructing this narrative, production overlooked the 2 most likable and funny queens who were just acts at the most convenient time because they were not the focus of the main storyline. And so in this haphazard plan, I think Ginger was the only one who was actually destined to make it all the way to the end. Violet was a solid antagonist to push alongside her, and Pearl... Listen, I don't know, people get too fucking weird about Pearl. I've seen the most out-of-pocket, parasocial nonsense written about her over the years, so I almost feel bad critiquing anything about her existence in relation to Drag Race because she's gotten it bad enough already. But what I will say is that I believe she did have the talent to make it to the end, but the optics of everything else I just mentioned did make it feel a little like she was carried there. But of course, before you get a top 3, you have to go through the process of eliminating the rest of the cast, and for the most part, it felt like every possible choice that could have been made as far as who was sent home was the wrong one. In the first episode, Tempest was the first one out, despite the fact that another contestant literally didn't follow the prompt for the challenge. Mrs. Kasha Davis was eliminated for pronouncing a word, despite being really strong up until that point. Trixie got sent home over Pearl, Max was sent home after winning 2 challenges. It just felt like every week, no matter what, everyone was unhappy with what was going on. And of course, this all came to a head with Kennedy versus Katya. Kennedy versus Katya was like the first really big controversy in the fandom that people still debate about to this day. Obviously, this is a tough dynamic to nail because you never know what the fans' reception to a queen will be until the season goes to air, but in retrospect, it would have been very easy to chuck Pearl in the bottom for wrapping a towel around herself and having either Katya or Kennedy send her home. But obviously, that is not what happened. Kennedy and Katya do a really great lip sync to Roar by Katy Perry. Katya gets eliminated and everyone loses their shit. And in my opinion, this was inevitable because of the love for Katya that had grown over the course of the season, but I don't think she was ever destined to make the top 3 anyway. Like, Kennedy wasn't really an obstacle here. I think had she survived this lip sync, she would have been eliminated just before the finale. And I do think Kennedy did win. I mean, Katya looked pretty nervous the whole time, but the level of insanity that took place surrounding this moment was unbelievable. People were trying to make the case that Kennedy should have been disqualified for jumping off the stage. At unprecedented levels of cope and seethe, and also, of course, shit got kinda racist because it always does. Anyway, by this point, people were just exhausted. In the case of the top 3, the general sentiment was that Pearl was carried there by getting saved at multiple points throughout the competition, and that Ginger was also carried there because she had lip-synced twice, whereas Violet didn't lip-sync at all, and despite everything, was pretty consistent in obviously the runways and also the challenges. I actually remember that by this point, most people somehow wanted Pearl to pull out the win, but there was also a lot of positive reception for Violet and not that much for Ginger, especially due to the events that had transpired in Untucked, which we'll talk about a little later. And so Violet ekes out a win, and at the time I think most people were generally receptive to that. She's a great queen, she's very talented, but I think this is one of the last Drag Race seasons we've ever seen where a winner wasn't 100% predetermined, for better or worse. I think she was supposed to be more of the villain to Ginger's hero arc, and public perception actually flipped that on its head quite a bit. Now let's talk about what most people like to discuss when it comes to this season, the challenges. Season 7 is weird because it has some of the best challenges to have ever been on the show, along with some of the worst ones. Shakespeare is obviously a notoriously bad acting challenge with a really bad script. This is also the point where the acting challenges started to get a lot more self-referential in terms of previous seasons of the show, which I remember being really confusing as someone who had seen this season with fresh eyes before watching anything else that had come before it. The RuPaul song parody challenge was also really bad, which is interesting because at the very least the queens were able to come up with their own lyrics for that one. Again, this one was also very self-referential because I had no idea who these 3 were supposed to be when I first watched it. The acting challenge they did where they all played Michelle Visage was pretty forgettable. The John Waters challenge could have been good if it wasn't a musical. I don't really understand why they had to incorporate the music aspect of it. I would have preferred like a John Waters runway or a makeover challenge or something. And the Hello Kitty ball was fun, but the bit where the mascot characters had to come out and do their own narration kind of ruined it for me, because like that clearly isn't designing an outfit. That's just like a weird thing to present on the runway and it isn't really drag to me. But on the flip side of things, there's a lot of challenges here that I think could be brought back. The Despy Awards was one of my favorite challenges they've done because the queens were given the opportunity to just be funny as themselves instead of having to pull some random character out of their ass. The makeover challenge was great. I think it was a really interesting idea to not only bring back the eliminated queens for a makeover, which gave us some really great and creative looks, but it gave us some great drama and actually paid off with Trixie getting to come back into the competition. My only issue with this is that it happened a little too late in the game for it to pay off narratively, because obviously whoever came back likely missed a lot of the season and wasn't going to get very far because it was bad optics, but it was still a fun idea nonetheless. And the dance challenge is still one of my favorites. It was so out of the box and weird, and I'm surprised they've never brought it back, but I think it's probably because it's really hard to edit around someone doing well or poorly in a performance like this, but I'd love to see it again. The other thing I loved about the season was less about the actual episodes themselves, but this, in my opinion, was the last good iteration of Untucked that we've ever had. If you're unfamiliar, this is when Untucked lost its sponsors, so they got rid of the separately decorated lounges and the games and all that, and went for more of a raw, behind-the-scenes feel, and all the episodes were posted on YouTube, with Untucked taking place backstage and even outside of the studio lot. This is the only Untucked season I regularly go back to watch, especially the combo of Ginger, Katya, and Kennedy. They're all funny as fuck. But also, I don't know if it was just the cast chemistry or the format change that allowed all of them to be more raw, but this is the most dramatic and bitchy season of Untucked, and you can tell at some points that the cast legitimately did not like each other, and in my opinion, this particular series gave the audience more of an insight on what it's like to be on Drag Race than anything else we've seen so far. Loved it. I know a lot of people want me to do a video about Untucked and why it needs a revamp, and I'll get to that eventually, but yeah, this and season 6 are like peak Untucked for me. And of course, because this is a retrospective, we can't talk about season 7 of Drag Race without talking about its overall cultural impact, and obviously it has yielded a lot of positive results in terms of the All-Stars market, Mrs. Kasha Davis on All-Stars 8, Ginger Minj being on All-Stars 2 and 6, and Kennedy on All-Stars 3 are a few notable examples. But the biggest phenomenon to come out of such a disliked season...
Hi, on the big gulp you get behind the 7-Eleven. Trixie Mattel.
That is horrid. That is horrid. That is horrid.
Listen, I know I don't give World of Wonder a lot of credit for anything, but putting Trixie and Katya together for a web series where they just talk about whatever is the smartest business move they have ever done. Last week, I actually went to Trixie Mattel's Solid Pink Disco at Pier 17 in New York City, and it's this series that she does where she gets up on stage and she does a DJ set, and Katya was also there, and there were so many people. It felt like truly a mainstream event, and so many people were wearing their merch and really just have such a big, deep appreciation for Trixie and Katya. It was the first time I had seen either of them perform anything live, and it was great. I had a blast, but it really just speaks to the impact that they've had kind of around the world. I feel like they're the closest thing that we've gotten to like very mainstream drag artists, to the point where like even if you're not necessarily a fan of Drag Race, there is a chance that you may have seen Trixie and Katya's show. I'd like to think that in another universe, knowing what they know, the producers probably would have pushed them both to top 5 on season 7, only to make them like heartbreakingly lip sync against each other instead of axing Trixie too early and letting Katya have an anxiety attack every episode until they had no narrative use for her. So yeah, those are my thoughts on season 7. I think it gets a bad rap just because of what came before it, but I also think it really transcended the show into being a more commercially viable entity and ultimately made Drag Race, you know, a lot of what it is today. I also think season 7 doesn't really need to be the punchline of everyone's jokes anymore, considering that season 13 exists.
You need to leave!
So I know I haven't done a retrospective on an older season like this in quite some time. Let me know if you enjoyed it and if you'd like me to do more of them. In terms of Drag Race content, I'm aiming to do like one video per month. It seems like the content on this channel has clearly evolved in the time I've been doing this, but I'm not abandoning Drag Race videos entirely. Expect to see me back on here for All Stars 8 in a few weeks because I have a lot of thoughts. That's all for me, you guys, and I'll see you next time.